With the Herta second rerun coming up, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering if they should still invest into her, since as we know in Starl, the meta does change very often if she is still dominating and such. And so today I'm here with the should you summon for her rerun. First, we're going to be highlighting what made her really strong all these months, some important things to consider, and then reasons why you should or should not summon. So the Herta had a lot of things going for her, not just because her kit was insanely strong. She already had a really broken kit, but it did help that a lot of things were centered around her for the longest time, like not just her herself being broken, but rather the actual MOC buffs, how they were designed, the ice weaknesses. Like, my god, everything until now felt like it had ice weakness. I don't know what it was, but I swear everything just had ice weakness. So the Herta just has really good multipliers, and she is able to do more damage based off interpretation stacks. Her enhanced skill, where you can easily do millions and millions of damage. Her also being full AoE in a game that very much favored AoE characters. Also, just having insanely strong vertical investment. The big issue she had of skill points was solved by her light code. It didn't completely solve it, like it doesn't gen you a bunch, but it did definitely help. Always guaranteed you to get the enhanced skill after you did use your ultimate, since when you ult, you get a full turn to use your skill, and when you do use your ultimate, you get the inspiration stack to use Hear Me Out, which is her enhanced skill, and the light cone would give you a skill point to always guarantee you were able to use it. She also had some pretty free-to-play options, like for the second Air Edition character, besides Jade and then later Anaxa. You could very much just use Mini Herta, you could very much use Serval. Like, she had a bunch of Air Edition characters that could work with her, just because she herself was that strong. She could practically carry, and you didn't have to have like a premium E1 tribute or anything either. Like, you very much could just get RMC of the team, pair with another thing if you're doing sustain this. You didn't have to have like Popo and manage your skill points really well for better buffs. You could just use a skill point generator. She just did really solid damage, had no trouble clearing, and again, all the end games were focused around her. So the Herta, she just had so many things going for her. She was just doing so goddamn well. There was really one downside to ever consider for her, which wasn't really a problem before, but is now becoming more of a problem with how the MOC battles have been shifting. So obviously, the Herta is mainly tailored to AoE. Her regular skill is a blast one, and her ultimate's AoE, her enhanced skill is fully AoE. Similar to other AoE characters that don't have a form of bounce, they struggle when it is just one target enemy, because the whole point is their damage is spread across all targets. If they did single target level damage on AoE, we would have a different level of power creep. But either you are a single target where you do main damage to one enemy, or your AoE who you kind of spread out your damage. AoE can have more damage, but it's less on each target. Like, the Herta AoE is going to hit multiple targets and do more across the 5 enemies, while a facial is going to do more on that one enemy you did attack. So while the Herta was a fully AoE character, she did struggle in the department where her single target damage obviously was not the greatest. It was definitely not bad. It's not like an older character that was fully AoE where they just didn't really have the greatest damage, especially if they weren't bounce. Bounce can get away from it because bounce is like honestly better as a single target because it takes all the hits that are supposed to spread out and go to that one enemy. But the Herta, that was really her only big issue, is when there is just one enemy, obviously her clear rate is going to go down. As the more enemies are on the field, usually that also means the HP is more spread up between them. So the main enemy is going to be tanky, but it's going to be less tanky from having 5 enemies on the field as opposed to just one that has all the HP. I mean, just look at Lagus. I know technically he does summon other things, but a part of the boss is usually either blast or mainly just him alone outside of his little nuke charge. And he has 11 million HP. That brings me to the next point of this actual video. So one thing you want to consider about the Herta is, yes, she is still broken, don't get me wrong, but the content has very much been shifting a little away from AoE. It was before purely AoE shell. Single targets really could not thrive. You were only able to use single target if you had good investment and or you were just really good at the game. But we have finally exited that meta. Blast skills and also single target DPS are doing a lot better, as we're getting into more boss level battles where it's just one big enemy, usually 1 to 2 or maybe even 3, where single targets can definitely thrive on 3 or less. Facial usage has gone up, even Buto usage has gone up, even the crackhead Zelemans have been going up. And the direct result from that is the fact that the Herta's overall potential is a bit reduced. This has no implications in Pure Fiction, because Pure Fictions is always going to be just 5 enemies that you constantly blast with the Herta, still just always going to be like the best unit there. But in MLC mainly, and even in APOC pretty often, it's usually just 1 enemy, maybe 3, so her performance is lowered and is not as much better as other characters now. Like, you're going to burst down an enemy and a singular boss way faster with someone like Archer, Facial ultimates, more than you would the Herta. So that is something you want to consider when you are planning your pulls is while yes, she is still incredibly broken, she is still one of the top DPSs in the game, she doesn't really have much to help her in that department as someone like Castrus kind of does as well, where Castrus is practically a full AoE character. But the thing that does help her is she has that last hit of her dragon when she detonates it, which the most common style is to detonate instantly. That thing is bounced, so it's able to constantly hit that one enemy, which is why it's not really a problem for her. Someone like Anaxa as well, where his problem is the opposite of the Herta, where he is better with less targets than more targets. Because his skill is bounce, more enemies means it's going to bounce off to more enemies more, so you get to focus on damage less. So if there's a boss plus 4 enemies on the side, it's going to be a bit more iffy. If there's one enemy, he's going to absolutely delete them. So unfortunately, the Herta doesn't have a form of bounce, she doesn't have a single target attack outside of her basic, but obviously her basic is not going to do more than her skill or her ultimate. So while yes, she still can do good damage to these enemies, like I'm not saying her damage is complete garbage against one enemy, like it's still fine. It's definitely passable, but there are just better characters that are more designed for that, obviously, because she was not designed with single target in mind. And it's something that's definitely worth considering. Now, before it wasn't too much just because, one, enemies didn't have much more HP. Enemies didn't have like an insane amount of HP back then when she released. It was still big, but now obviously it's more. And as I mentioned, she constantly got shield. The MLC buffs were meant for her. Even APOC buffs you can choose, Pure Fiction buffs you can choose, they were all meant for her. Ice weakness across the board. But now that is different, and obviously it going from a full AoE where it's practically always just 5 enemies for you to fight. That's also been changing. It's going down to 3, potentially maybe even go down to 1. So it's really something you should definitely consider when you are planning your pulls. If you want a character to help you more on the universal side of things, it might be better to consider a other DPS that has some bounce elements to help with AoE and also single target. Especially if you're going for lower investment, like obviously if you vertically invest into Herta, get a bunch of like maybe like E2, her Lycone, dupes in like Tribi, so on, then it becomes a different story where you can still just do enough damage to the point it doesn't matter. Like she still won't out damage the single target dedicated or bounce dedicated characters, but she will do enough to where it doesn't matter. But as I mentioned, it is something to definitely consider. Now, reasons why you should summon for the Herta. Very straightforward. If you're in need of an ice DPS, the Herta is practically one of the best considerations, practically the only consideration. She is releasing with Evernight, who's going to be the other consideration because Evernight is also incredibly broken, which I will also have a should you summon very soon, so stay tuned for that. But if you're in need of an ice DPS or even a general DPS that can cover you on the AoE sides, or you need one dedicated for Pure Fiction that works fine in the other modes, the Herta is a great consideration. Again, she has very flexible team options for her Erudition character. You can use any form of AoE buffer or even a single target buffer. There's always RMC, who's completely free. A lot of accounts will always own Rod May, Robin, even Tribi, probably Tribi 1 as well. You can really use any sustains on the team. She just has a really flexible team, especially with team building, that you can get by. So if you don't have the optimal team of running E1 Tribi, the Herta, Anaxa, and if Sustainless, another AoE buffer, or even someone like Sunday, maybe even E1 Sunday, or a Popo. If you're someone that has like Serval available, let's say you have Tribi, but you don't have her E1, she still works very, very well in that environment. Sustain, you can really just use anyone in her teams. If you have trouble with skill points on the team, you can just very much build a fast Gallagher, or even Linksha, or Luotra, so on. Doesn't have to be premium like Wopo. If you're in need of another DPS to help you in those cases, Herta is a very good consideration for that role. Her damage output to 3 to 5 enemies is always going to be very solid. Always going to be probably the best character in something like Pure Fiction for a while more to come. And as I already mentioned, her team flexibility is still really good. And also really easy to pilot. So if that kind of DPS fits your needs, then you should definitely consider her still. Now the flip side, for reasons why you should not summon. Pretty much would be the opposites if you're not in need of an ice DPS specifically, or you don't really need a DPS. Obviously, that's going to be the biggest reason to skip. If you're someone that needs more single target to maybe 3 target coverage, so 3 targets or less coverage, there are definitely better options to consider. Like you should just invest into an archer team in that case. There are blast DPSs that work great. You can even function in a bounce setup character such as Castrus with her dragon, detonating, or even a Noxa main hypercarry. There are just better options in that case for you to consider. So let's say you're someone who maybe need another DPS, but you can still do something like Pure Fiction completely fine. You mainly struggle in battles that have 3 to less enemies because the HP is more focused. Maybe they do more damage. They're just too tanky for you to kill. In that case, I would also personally skip and focus on another DPS to help you in that little regard. So once again, if you're someone who has the DPS, obviously you won't need another one. If DPSs like Castrus, Finon, and so on can help you clear, then you won't need another one. Or if you're someone that has DPSs but struggle in 3 or less enemies and single target cases, then you can also focus on someone else, as the Herta is not specialized in single target battles. Now the last segment of this video, it's purely regarding vertical investment. I want to add this to my should you summon stuff just because it is something that people will consider, and this will also make it good for people who already own the character. So I mainly will be talking about S1, E1, and also a bit of E2. So if we take a look at our light cone, it provides 12% crit rate, it gives a 60% increase to skill and ultimate damage when using ultimate, and also gives the access to getting a skill point back when you do ult. Her E1 will have the enhanced skill when it does calculate the number of interpretation stacks. It additionally counts 50% of the number of interpretation stacks on a target, with the most stacks among the primary target and adjacent targets. And when you reset interpretation by using her enhanced skill, it will reset it to 15 instead. And her E2 will give her an inspiration stack entering the battle, and when you do use her enhanced skill, it advances the Herta's next action by 35%. So all these options are actually incredibly strong still to this day. E1 helps you hit max stacks requirements for the best amount of damage a lot more quickly and also much easier on your team requirements, as the team helps you very much when it comes to getting interpretation stacks and such. E1 helps significantly with that, and also instead of resetting to 0 stacks, you get to reset to 15 instead, which is a fantastic head start on your next enhanced skill, and it's also a very strong stepping stone to her E2. E1 actually does outperform getting S1 in most cases, only if you have a solid next option for her light cone. Her light cone is great because the crit rate is very good, because the Herta doesn't really need as much crit damage, as she gives herself 80%, so getting 120% as a build would mean having 200% in battle. Crit rate is really important just because you want to get to close as 100% as possible. It amplifies her main source of damage being skill, and also her ultimate, which hits really hard at the same time. And the Herta teams are usually SP black holes. The Herta always wants to skill, Anoxa wants to skill frequently, but with him it's a bit less so. If you're running Jade, it's different because you can obviously use her basic attack always. Depending on your sustain, whatever you're doing with that might want to as well. Occasional resets on your supports, and so on. So the extra skill point you can get from her light cone is also extremely helpful. Her E2 straight up gives you an enhanced skill to use right away, because you get an inspiration stack to use right away. And 35% advanced action when you do use her enhanced skill is great because you can act quicker, meaning you could skill faster and get more energy for the Herta herself quicker. So if you are someone who actively uses the Herta and you want to potentially vertically invest in her but you're not sure if it's worth it, quite literally, in my opinion, every single option is good. E1 if you have better light cone options, and E1 in general is usually just always better, but again, if you have no light cone options, then getting her S1 is good. Like if you're using something like a seriousness of breakfast for her, like that level of down bad, then obviously going for her light cone is just going to be a better play. Light cone is also significantly easier to get because it's 75% with lower pity. So in that case, it's a really good pickup. Her E1, fantastic pickup. Again, more stacks and getting it quicker, maxing out the stacks, resetting it to 15 instead to get a big jump start. And her insanely broken E2 giving you an inspiration stack right away, and also letting you get more output with an advance forward when you are using her enhanced skill. So there's really not much to talk about here. Any single one of these options are great. If you're at E0 S0, picking up her E1 or her S1, both definitely recommended. If you have solid light cone options, then E1. If you don't, then S1. If you want to get E1 and S1, that's also fantastic. Obviously, this changes from player to player, since you're going to have different goals, different setups, different builds, and so on. But as a general, her E1 is great. Her E2 is super broken, so if you're maybe even at E1, S1, and you want to go for E2, definitely can recommend that if you are wanting to vertically invest. All options, once again, are just extremely powerful, and can actually further increase her potential in single target scenarios, which can kind of offset the issues I was talking about previously in the actual should you summon portion. And that does wrap up the entire video, going over everything you need to know, why the Herta is really strong, what was kind of favoring her, her only problem and the kind of problems going forward, reasons why you should and should not summon, and also vertically investment portions. Hope this video answered any questions you did have. Once again, dropping a like on the video would be greatly appreciated, and if you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to the button for future videos like this along with all the tips of content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.